The PE teacher said I was pretending to have asthma to skip laps until the ambulance arrived. Coach Henderson had been cracking down on lazy students faking medical conditions all semester, and with my wheezing and requests for breaks, I looked like every other kid trying to get out of running. I looked so out of shape that other students called me Wheezy in the hallways, and Coach's assistant kept a special eye on me during warm-ups. So when I showed him my inhaler before class that Tuesday, I knew he thought I was overplaying it. He barely glanced at it before his jaw clenched tight. His gaze lingered on my pale complexion and thin frame, and he crossed his massive arms over his whistle. Another asthma emergency? His voice boomed across the gymnasium while he made exaggerated air quotes. He didn't reach for the medical exemption forms in his office. Instead, he pulled out his clipboard and wrote "Faker" in large letters next to my name. 20 minutes into running laps, my chest started tightening. I raised my hand asking for my inhaler, but Coach just shook his head. "Push through it, Matthews. Mental toughness builds character." The assistant coach, Mr. Clay, jogged over with that same skeptical look. "I've seen plenty of kids claim asthma to avoid cardio." He pointed at my heaving chest. "That's just being out of shape." My vision started tunneling as I collapsed to my knees on the track. Coach Henderson walked over slowly, no urgency in his step. "Nice performance, but you're still finishing those laps." He grabbed my inhaler from the bench and held it up like evidence. "You don't need this crutch. You need discipline." He tossed it into his equipment bag and zipped it shut. That's when my lips started turning blue. Another student, Brett, started screaming, "He's actually dying!" But Coach thought it was part of the act. He told Brett to stop enabling weakness. My throat was closing. I couldn't speak to tell them about the severity of my condition. Exercise-induced asthma, complicated by a rare airway disorder that 3 specialists monitored. The medical documentation sat unread in the nurse's office because Coach didn't believe in coddling. I blacked out on the track while Coach was still lecturing about this generation's softness. Brett's dad was an EMT and had taught him the signs. He called 911 himself while Coach tried to stop him, saying he was overreacting. The dispatcher heard Coach in the background saying, "The kid's fine, he's faking." The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. They found me unconscious with oxygen levels at 73%. One of them looked at Coach and said, "5 more minutes and this would have been a corpse." They intubated me right there on the track while the entire PE class watched. Coach's face went from annoyed to terrified when they said, "Respiratory failure." The principal, Mr. Davis, arrived as they were loading me into the ambulance. The paramedic handed him my medical file they'd pulled up. "This kid has documented severe asthma plus tracheal stenosis. Says here he's had 4 hospitalizations." Why was he running laps? Coach tried to stammer about building character and kids faking conditions, but Brett had been recording on his phone since I collapsed. The video showed Coach taking my inhaler, calling me a faker, refusing to help as I turned blue. At the hospital, they kept me on a ventilator for 2 days. My parents' lawyer served the school papers while I was still intubated. The video Brett took went viral. 2 million views of a coach watching a kid suffocate while calling him weak. The investigation found 17 other students with documented conditions that Coach had dismissed. One girl with epilepsy he'd accused of fake shaking. A kid with diabetes he called dramatic for needing glucose tablets. Coach got fired immediately. Criminal charges for child endangerment. His teaching license revoked in all 50 states. The assistant coach, Mr. Clay, was suspended and had to complete mandatory medical training. 6 months later, I testified at the school board hearing, still using supplemental oxygen on bad days. Coach sat there in his suit looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. When they asked if he had anything to say, he mumbled about just trying to make them tougher. The superintendent's response was brutal. "You nearly killed a child because you thought you knew better than medical professionals." Coach got 18 months in prison and has to pay my medical bills for life. He treated me like a faker, but he's the one who ended up exposed as a fraud, someone pretending to be an educator while actively endangering children.